Hey, Joe, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you taking a little bit of time. I know things have gotten really busy for you since we worked together, but I thought your story was cool and unique. So I wanted to just ask you a few questions, see if you could, share what your experience was. First, uh, just say a little bit about you, what you do, what kind of organization you're in, what level you play at right now, and then we'll talk about where you were before, we started working together.
Yeah. Well, my name's Joe Roten. I am a senior strategy director with a $1 billion technology organization that particularly focuses on corporate communications software. Um, my role within the organization is reporting directly into the C-suite, helping them with indirect growth. What do I mean by that? Partnerships, technology integration, net new feature product innovation, anything that essentially will ultimately drive revenue, but doesn't necessarily exist today. So that's what I do, and that's who I am.
Cool, great. So tell me, if you can go back, what situation were you in when we connected?
I felt plateaued. I was essentially in kind of a commercial driving role. So I was responsible for, you know, enabling and selling a product within the enterprise, coming off kind of a decade worth of, fairly sales heavy roles. I had an obsession and thought that my sweet spot and my skill set in the area of discipline that I wanted to focus on kind of felt like corporate strategy, corporate business development. Um, but I didn't necessarily know how to get there. I knew that I had certain skills that could be applied. I was taking a lot of like LinkedIn learning courses. I was interviewing a lot of people in similar types of roles, but really trying to figure out like where the confidence gap was that I needed to bridge, where the skills gap was that I needed to bridge, and just try and figure out how to pull it off. That's kind of where I was at.
Got it. Do you remember what it was that had you, what had you choose to work with me? What had you made that choice? What did you see or what attracted you?
First impressions, I could tell that I think you reached out on LinkedIn, and who knows, you probably had some strategic way how you found me based on some sort of feature or status that I had on my profile. So
Actually, if
kudos.
I can, I'll only step in. You reached out for help on your resume through ProFinder, and then I responded back saying, "Hey,
Oh, perfect.
you might consider another way to approach your career." But I just want to throw that in there that that's how we connected.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. So, yeah, in essence, right, I was actively looking for support. Sounds like resume support. Um, and you somehow found me through that. And then for whatever reason, I think that the outreach was compelling, it was strategic, and it felt like something that I needed. So yeah, that's why I took the meeting.
Got it. So if you can just describe, what was your experience in doing the work together? I guess, what stuck with you, what rung true for you, what was your experience? How was it for you?
It's like It's like McKinsey married a therapist and had a baby. It was like, you had very good business acumen. There was really interesting business science behind, I think, the framework. Albeit, I don't know that I felt or realized that till later in the process. So if you think about like the experience from beginning to the point at which it started to kind of make sense to me. I would say the beginning was definitely more over indexing on the therapist version of it, just like asking really interesting questions about, my youth, my upbringing, my experience in like elementary school, like I will definitely say that, I'd be lying if I didn't say that there were a number of times beginning in the process where I wasn't like, where the fuck is he going with this? You know what I mean? But it was intriguing and I was really interested because I wanted to see the output. But I always appreciated kind of the have faith in the process, kind of trust me where I'm going with this and the discovery that you put into it, which I felt like once we started to unravel it and I saw where you're going with it and started piecing it together was like, oh, that is really cool. But two, really differentiated. I mean, like, you know, you could have approached it a number of different ways. It's not the first time I've hired, let's call it a business coach or a life coach or, invested in self-development type stuff. So certainly unique and obviously valuable. You know what I mean? So
Got it. Got it. And was there anything, I guess, that you learned in that process that, I don't know, changed the way you were originally looking for help with your resume, right? Did anything stand out for you, or what did you come out of that process with in terms of a broader understanding of your career management, or what resonated for you?
yeah, it's funny. It's like I started with, resume support, and I feel like concluding with you, resume was just a byproduct of all the really cool stuff that happened throughout the process, And sure, the resume piece was valuable, but it's funny thinking about it now. It's like the resume to me was like probably the least value that I got out of the entire engagement with you. It's just kind of like a byproduct of all the work that we put into, you know, validate, I guess to take a step back to answer your actual question, a few things validating some assumptions that I had, but through kind of a pragmatic scientific approach. What do I mean by that? I really enjoyed kind of the flashcard exercise that we put together, which really allowed me to just try and understand. I forget your matrix, but what stood out to me is like there are things that I'm inherently good at, but they aren't necessarily things that I like. You know what I mean? Like that, and not necessarily things that I'm even interested in. And to a certain extent, a lot of my career has been built off of my skill set, the talent that I think we were able to validate. But kind of the interest index is where you tried to help me kind of drive and focus on. So it put a big fat spotlight on kind of this really interesting matrix of like, what am I good at? What am I really interested in? You know, what makes money, right? Because we've got to find this kind of balance of, interest and commerce, and then try and identify that in the sweet spot. And whether it's a self-fulfilling prophecy or not, I came into it thinking, not necessarily knowing that my end state was kind of this corporate strategic role within an enterprise. And going through that process kind of validated that, but not only validated it, it also helped create kind of a framework and a blueprint as to how to get there. And I think that was the big missing piece, which is like, how do I actually turn what I want into reality? And you had a really good functional process to kind of just like check the box, which I think was helpful. Because otherwise you just get an analysis paralysis, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah.
Got it. What was the results? What were your results that came out of the work
Yeah,
that you
well,
put together?
whether you work with Daryl or not, you'll realize real quick that he's got a pretty interesting kind of network framework that he implements where you kind of put yourself out into the universe and you start strategically networking and you brand yourself. Once you go through kind of like all that self-identification process and you've got to your official brand, then you go execute and go put yourself out there. So that's what I did. And I kind of doubled down internally, because I work for a big company. So I'm like, I've got a huge network within the entire organization. So I basically went on a road show internally and said, hey, listen, this is my destiny. This is the value that I believe I can bring to this enterprise. This is why you should care. And oh, by the way, I'm not looking for anything except for just advice and counsel. And you're in interesting positions right now. And as a result of doing that, a couple things happened. Uh, I got to put myself in a position to apply for, let's call it quote unquote, the dream job. I didn't get the dream job right out of the gate. Um, In fact, talk about the law of attraction. So I put myself out there. I kind of went through this road show. Uh, Interestingly enough, too, the manager at the time that I had, I think it gave him a framework to help me because I think he was like, "This kid's valuable. He's extremely talented, but I don't know how to help him." So I think it allowed him to kind of be a good sponsor for me once I got clear on like what I actually wanted. But long story short, you know, my dream job just appeared out of nowhere. So we acquired this company, this guy took over this division, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm looking for insert Joe's dream job," right? So I sunk my teeth into that. I kind of worked my way through that, cross-functional network. I got in front of them, had a couple of interviews, and at the end of the day, they hired someone with more experience that came from like a McKinsey or some, big, corporate strategic consulting firm. Flash forward, 6 months later, talk about law of attraction, COO, totally different business unit, whom she had been part of that roadshow, um, said, "Hey, uh, I have a position that I'm going to create, and I think you'd be a good fit for it." And almost word for word, I think she may have actually just taken the job description template from the guy that I had interviewed because it was almost word for word with a couple minor tweaks, different business unit, different revenue, different goals. Um, and it literally came into my inbox. So what was really interesting, I tell you that long-winded story because what was interesting about it is one, the roadshow, putting yourself out there into the universe, soliciting like all of this cross-functional support. Like there was no doubt that there was conversations at the ELT, the enterprise leadership level, of like, "Hey, there's this guy, he wants to do this. Does anyone have anything like this?" And one gal who happened to be our COO was like, "I don't have that, but we need that. So I'll create it." And therefore inserted myself into the puzzle that way.
Wow. So, you originally came because you were considering maybe going outside to find a home where you'd really be appreciated and be able to play at the level that you wanted
Correct.
to, but you ended up turning this into an inside job.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm proud, and it gave me it helped bridge a nice confidence gap that I think I had about like creating opportunities. You always hear like the best of the best will like create their own job within an organization. And I actually got to do that. You know what I mean? Like I got to check that box. And it wasn't necessarily my goal, but doing that in itself helped kind of give me a lot of confidence win because stepping into the role, like anything, like you get your dream job, I was nervous as shit. I'm just like, what have I done? You know what I mean? Like imposter syndrome, multiplied by 10x, you know, and then, it's been off to the races since.
That's awesome, man. So I think you're reporting directly to the COO now, or two level somewhere like that, right?
Yeah, directly into the COO, and there may be a couple changes because we just got a new CEO, but ultimately the gal that owns the $400 million business unit. I mean, we call it the janitor. It's what keeps the lights on. 90% profit. 100-year-old business ripe for innovation. I've shipped 16 concepts. Two of which have landed, which is good. And considering it's not hard. I mean, it's not easy to inspire change within a very old large organization. It's so
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, last question I asked you specifically. I work with professionals, at all different levels of the organization or different fields within the organization. But you've been in the sales side of things, and what I've always noticed is that when people who are in sales learn this method, it does a connect that wasn't there before, but it allows them to take that relationship kind of ability that they already have, but then point it in a way towards their own career. Is there anything you could say about that you may have noticed around that?
The One of the things that I learned going through your process is that, if we go back to what I just said not too long ago, there was things that I was inherently good at, but things that I didn't necessarily weren't wildly interesting to me. Sales was one of those things that I was inherently good at, and that's by design kind of what I've done for the last decade, right? Some form or fashion. Um, what I was interested in is, strategic innovation and, inspiring change and influencing very powerful people to make things happen. What I've realized is no matter what, at least for me, you have to have sales. You know what I mean? Like there's sales peppered into everything, especially in the role that I'm in now. It's like, hey, I just inspired a really good idea to be implemented into a very big enterprise. Guess what? Now we got to go sell the shit out of it. And guess who's responsible for the go-to-market strategy? Daddy over here. So at the end of the day, yeah, taking that sales component piece of this, pointing it internally to help you prospect internally around what do you actually want? How do you operationalize that? How do you close that deal? But also, I think acknowledging that like it never goes away. You know what I mean? Like we're always selling. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, yeah, no, exactly. Well, first off, well, thanks. Thanks for demonstrating that this process can take different turns. Some people have created businesses with it. Some people have gotten new roles with it, and you demonstrate what I see a lot of people demonstrating too, is that somehow you're vibing or standing in your value in a whole other way that has people not want to get rid of you and carve a place for you to make the difference that you want to make there. So thanks for demonstrating that. Appreciate your time. Anything you wanted to say finally for anyone considering doing this work?
um, sounds like Alcoholics Anonymous, but trust the process. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, yeah, I think that your process was, again, really interesting. But in hindsight, looking back on it, I really appreciated it. I'm kind of pigheaded and stubborn at times. So I think at times, especially early on in the process, I was frustrated. Probably similar to like an alcoholic going through all the steps of denial and all this stuff. It's just like this bunch of bullshit. You know what I mean? But then all of a sudden, the repetition and especially kind of putting things out on paper when it started to click, I'm like, oh, this is actually really valuable. It's really unique. And it was kind of both emotional, spiritual, physical, right? But also financial, right? Which is just the end goal. But it was cool how you wrapped all of that up, because especially now sitting in a room with, as the guy kind of leveraging a similar data-driven approach to inspiring thought-provoking ideas that maybe didn't exist before, maybe people haven't acknowledged. Um, there's definitely this lack in business and enterprise and just B2B of like emotion and kind of going back to like why we're all here and what we're actually good at and why we are good at it. That I feel like you brought to the table that was like, I don't know, it was just thought provoking. You know what I mean? Is really interesting. And then you delivered, you fucking executed. Like you helped me get what I wanted to do, which is at the end, that's the sales part of my brain, which is like, you know, fucking deliver, right? So yeah,
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for taking a little bit to share your experience. I appreciate it.
my pleasure.